Hello, this is Max Gartung, and I'm here today to present my container project for English 204. Let's begin. When you first look at my container, you'll probably notice right away that it's built out of Legos. And perhaps you're wondering, why would I choose to build it with Legos in the first place? Well, it's actually an origin story of sorts. When I was a kid, I was introduced to Legos early on, and building with Legos is something that I immediately fell in love with doing. The process of putting things together from smaller pieces was very intriguing to me, and I built a lot of Lego sets while I was growing up. It was through my love of Lego that I discovered the online game Roblox in 2009 when I was only 10 years old. If you do much research on Roblox today, you may not see much of a connection between it and Lego, but the game had a very Lego-like aesthetic at the time, as you can see here. The style of the floor there is clearly inspired by Legos, and the house behind me there was also built out of Lego pieces. So you can imagine that I had a blast playing this game as a kid with virtually unlimited Legos to build with. To this day, I still create games on the Roblox platform, and it's actually how I'm paying for my college tuition. So, in a way, building with Legos as a kid put me on a path of circumstances that more or less kickstarted my interest in computer science, and that's the major I'm currently pursuing at NIU. Now, besides the relation to Lego itself, I also want to talk about how the appearance and pieces of this container symbolize me. Firstly, I think it gives off a resourceful but clumsy looking vibe. This seems to fit my character and appearance quite well. If you're looking for someone who knows what they're talking about with regards to computer science and Roblox development, I'm probably your guy, despite the fact that I look a bit goofy in person. I also think it represents the personality I've quote-unquote built over my lifetime. Each brick can represent an experience that I've been through, and my essence is shaped through those experiences. It also looks a bit spaced out and lacks a consistent pattern across the surface. I think this can sort of represent my disorganized and scatterbrained personality. And lastly, I have this principle in life that you can build great things from simple components. That's true in programming, software, and game development, and the steps you take in life, really. Alright, so, what's actually inside of this container?
What's in the box?
Well, let's find out. Drumroll, please. Nothing! Well, physically speaking at least. Well, I probably could have crammed the objects I have in mind for this into the container. I didn't really think it was worth the hassle, and plus, it would look really awkward in this slide. Maybe I could have built the container a little bigger. I don't know. Whatever. Let's just analyze what I put in here, shall we? Okay, the first thing I decided to put into my container is a teddy bear. Why a teddy bear? Well, for one thing, I'm a hairy-looking beast. That's my mom's words, not mine. I haven't cut my hair in over a year now, and bears have a lot of hair too, I guess. If you were somehow convinced that a teddy bear is a real bear, you might be intimidated by the appearance of it. Likewise, I'm a big guy, and I look a bit shabby, so people might be intimidated by how I look. I don't know. The truth is, though, I'm actually a bit of a softie when you get to know me. I deal with emotions, I never really hide them, I'm not much of a manly figure. I just conduct myself in a way that makes me feel normal. If you're going through a hard time, maybe you cope with that by hugging a teddy bear by your side or something? Maybe not so much if you're an adult, but you never know. In the same vein, I try to help comfort my friends when they're going through tough times, talking to them about the problems that they're having and see if I can help them get better. I am also a very heavy sleeper when I'm allowed to sleep in, much like a bear going into hibernation. I haven't been able to do it much recently because I have a job now, but I would not hesitate to sleep in every day if I could. I'm also kind of soft and cuddly. I don't know. I'm a bit overweight, so you could argue that, I guess. Okay, the next thing I put into my container is a pair of dice. How exactly do these represent me? Well, what I choose to work on and how I organize my time is a bit unpredictable. I think it's related to my overall lack of attentiveness and organization, but it's also a factor of the chronic procrastination habits that I have due to my ADHD. There's a chance I'll get stuff done that I need to get done when it's due, but other times I'll blow it off way past the last minute. It really just depends on what I'm doing and if I'm willing to put forward the mental energy to make it something good. More often than not, I find my attention drifting towards things that I'm interested in doing rather than what I'm required to do. It's a very hard thing for me to cope with, especially given that you'll always encounter things in life that you don't want to do, but you just have to get it done no matter how long it takes or how poorly balanced your work-school life balance is. Pertaining to the analogy of sides on the dice, there are many different sides to my personality. On one hand, might seem like a very shy and inattentive person, but I am quite enthusiastic and motivated when I do work that I put passion and confidence into, no matter how late I get it done. And lastly, the concept of random number generation ties into my computer science major. When you're developing games, random number generation is a helpful tool in making visual effects, dropping random items for people to have, etc. Next up, we have a Fedora. Yeah, I'm really grasping at straws here for ideas, and I probably wouldn't have been able to fit one of these into my container if I tried. With that said, though, I do have some interesting points to link myself to this kind of hat. Firstly, fedoras are associated with hacker culture online. There's this idea of white hat hackers and black hat hackers. The white hat hackers do hacking for good, and then the black hats do it for bad things, illegal things. I consider myself to be a white hat, despite the hats presented on the right being black. I'll get back to that in a moment. Now, as a white hat hacker, I see myself as doing hacks for positive and good reasons, like I mentioned. One of my antics is that I develop software that works alongside data from Roblox to help enhance the experience for power users. Now, if you don't know what a power user is a person who messes with features of software that are not well known to the public to enhance their own experience. I data mine versions of Roblox to provide people with a stream of data relating to new features and changes that Roblox is making to their game engine. I also built my own installer for Roblox's game creation tools, so power users can make experimental modifications to the software that you normally wouldn't be able to do. And Roblox is okay with me doing this stuff so long as I make it clear that people are on their own and they aren't responsible for any of the risks opened by using power user tools. I've been doing it for many years now. It's been a pretty fun side hobby of mine, alongside creating games. Now, with all that said, people who wear fedoras in real life unfortunately grew to be stereotyped as overweight guys with neckbeards who act misogynistic, which is why I've tried to distance myself from that culture. I haven't actually worn a fedora in public for at least 7 years. The reality is, it's just a hat that I've worn on my Roblox avatar for over 10 years now, and it's stuck with me ever since. It's been a part of my online identity for so long that I feel it overshadows that stereotype, and it's just a stylistic component of my avatar. Next up, we have a soft pretzel. Again, kind of grasping at straws here. So, how do I relate to a soft pretzel? Well, I'm always very twisted up in my schedule. For the longest time, I was able to get away with putting work off to the last minute because I had no other responsibilities besides school. But now that I have a job and I'd never really developed any sort of balance for school and work, it's been a massive hassle for me to stay on top of things, to say the least. My mood kind of changes depending on how tired I am and what kind of stress I'm dealing with. Some days I'm salty and bitter with contempt over things I don't want to do. Other days I'm sweet, taking everything in stride and trying to be positive. And the sweet analogy is supposed to be for soft pretzels that have cinnamon on them. It works, trust me. Trust me, it works. Like the loops of a pretzel, I find myself looping over the same patterns and mistakes in my habits. I have been in college for over 3 years now, and you'd think I would have learned how to cope with procrastination habits, but nope. It's all still the same for me. My skin also kind of feels like dough, I guess, and I bake very easily in the sun because I have bad skin. I have to wear a ridiculous amount of sunscreen to avoid getting fried in under an hour. As I mentioned before, I'm a bit scatterbrained, and I can kind of draw an analogy between that and salt scattered on the surface of a pretzel. My mind and attention is always all over the place. Lastly, I literally crave pretzels because of the salty flavor. Something about it just makes my brain much more alert, and I think it is a factor of my ADHD. From what I've heard, like people with ADHD, their brains don't produce enough dopamine on their own. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but with that, I'm vulnerable to craving things. Thankfully, I've stayed away from dangerous stuff like hard drugs, but I never really feel normal unless I have something to keep my brain happy and focused. And finally, I decided to pick a roll of duct tape as my last item. Here's the reason why I picked it. I like to patch up and fix things to make them better. Usually it has to do with socialization, friendships, and programming, rather than like physical repairs, though I do that occasionally too. I'm not much of a hands-on guy though. I also hate to be involved with or see any conflict between people, Sometimes I'll play devil's advocate and like try to understand the rationality on both sides to see if it's possible to help find a resolution and just make everyone happy. Because like if the people around me aren't happy, I'm not happy either. And I try to get that fixed in whatever ways I can so that we can have a more positive experiences so we can have more positive experiences than negative ones. But with that said, duct tape is not always the answer to fixing something that is broken. If it isn't strong enough, it might just break again, and the effort you put in to fix it wouldn't have been worth it. Likewise, I have to be careful with when and how I try to intervene in conflicts, because shit might just hit the fan and it wouldn't have been worth the energy to try and resolve anything. I also really don't like poorly written code. Throw any bad code in front of me, including code that I wrote prior to like mid 2018. I'll probably make like a shit ton of small patches and changes to it to the point where it's pretty much unrecognizable from its original version. With the game I'm currently working on, I've had to completely throw out and rewrite a large chunk of the systems that the previous programmer for the game wrote because it was just too messy and verbose for me to work with. I needed to break it down into simpler components so that the code would be much more logistical and reusable. And I'm very happy with the systems I've built since. But with all that said, one analogy I like to make of game development is that you're building a tower of duct tape, and if you don't reinforce that tower with enough duct tape, in this case the duct tape is good, stable code, then everything will crash and burn with too much stress applied to that tower. This is more or less what happened to those old systems I mentioned. Many of them were sloppy and not well designed enough to be extended in the future without massive headaches. How did all these things tie together into one idea? What's the bigger picture here of my identity? Well, let's dig into it a little bit. I think it all ties back really to me having ADHD. It has definitely been the biggest influence to who I am as a person, and I've been diagnosed with it for as long as I can remember. I know I was on medication for it as early as 7 years old, so I decided to research a little more into the medical consensus on ADHD and how it seems to tie back into the objects in my container and my personality in general. So first, let's look over some factors of people who might have ADHD, according to the CDC. Often avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to do tasks that require mental effort over a long period of time. This definitely fits me. When it comes to learning new things that may not interest me that much, I'm very uncomfortable throughout the entire process. For example, I'd never done a big research project prior to the one I did in English 204, so it oftentimes felt like I was swimming in the deep end of a pool. Often has trouble organizing tasks and activities. Absolutely. There's a reason why I'm turning this in so late. I have no real work-school balance, and I almost never directly schedule anything I need to get done. My brain just isn't adept for those kind of things. And evidently I put myself at a disadvantage by not trying to at least make an attempt to fix those things. Often loses things necessary for tasks and activities. Yep, this one was definitely a massive annoyance of mine for a while. I probably went through at least 3 to 4 laptop chargers before I finally got into the routine of unplugging it before leaving a classroom at NIU. I probably could have gone through the effort of trying to find them, but I figured they got turned into the police or something, and yeah, it was lost. There was no chance I was going to find it. I think I did attempt, but I don't know. Anyway, I also now have my car key attached to my wallet to make sure it's very difficult for me to lose sight of them, or for them to fall out of my pockets by any chance. Yeah. Is often easily distracted. Yep. I do it to myself sometimes because I'm just bored and want to tune out of the world around me. I often have multiple tabs open on my desktop browser because I get sidetracked by other things that I spontaneously decide to do and get sidetracked by things. I tell myself that I'll do something real quick and suddenly 2 hours will have passed by and I have no idea what happened. I also read an online article called The Creativity of ADHD. This article was published on Scientific American, and it was written by Holly White, a research scientist in the psychology department at the University of Michigan. This article discusses how ADHD may bring forward more creative thinking, despite the problems it presents as a neurological disorder. Through studies she looked into and conducted herself, she found that people with ADHD are more effective in divergent thinking, which is a factor of creativity where someone is able to think of many things from a single idea. She found that ADHD students preferred not to be conformative in their ideas, Instead felt confident taking risks outside of the constraints put before them, as a sort of drive for creative innovation. One quote from this article that carried with me went as such: ADHD may create difficulties for individuals in many contexts that require focused, sustained attention, such as school, where students are expected to sit still and pay attention. On the other hand, the same distractibility and chaotic mind can give people with ADHD an edge when it comes to creative, original thinking. I really agree with this sentiment as someone with ADHD who does creative work. Creating things is my calling. I like to push boundaries and innovate beyond what people expect of myself and others. I struggle with things that I'm not interested in doing, and it's hard to deal with because life demands things of you, regardless if you want to do them or not. I would like to argue that college could be structured better for people like me. My parents, they always talk down to my disgruntled ramblings about college because, quote unquote, that's just the way things are, and you can't find success in life if you don't get a college degree. And, they might be right in the long term, but I've been able to find success so far outside of an academic setting, and I'm proud of the work that I've done. I just wish I could make it known to the wider NIU community of who I am and what I do, because I think they would be quite interested. I also wish the effort and energy I put into my creative ambitions and my hobby projects could earn me some sort of college credit. I have no disrespect for any of the courses that I dislike. They just aren't for me, and I really don't like this notion of packing on requirements to graduate college. I think it should be more of a choose-your-own-adventure kind of path thing, where, if you can demonstrate that you create great things and you know what you're doing, you can sort of add that onto your credits, I guess. So with all that said, there is obviously more that I could dive into with regards to psychology, the science, etc. of ADHD. But I don't really see much value in it, for reasons that should hopefully make a little more sense with this larger perspective on my personality and character. I think there's more value to be had in my deeper thoughts on this stuff, rather than just shoehorning academic research into this just because, of requirements that are asked of all students, I'm not the same as all students. I'm not fit for gen ed. I'm different. But, to end all this on more of a positive note, I really enjoy these kinds of assignments because, they allow me to speak for myself and be open about who I am. The things I go through in life, and when I really don't feel like I fit the standard mold of a college student. Academic work really should be more about personal reflections where we can speak for ourselves, rather than being constrained to some standard research paper expectations. There's a time and a place for them, and maybe there's more value to be had doing those things when it's of value to us. But being forced to do topics that don't really pertain to our interests, I just don't see much value in that. But, at the end of the day, I don't think much of my rambling about college or procrastination is going to move the goalposts or change anything for people like me. Perhaps I'm wrong about it, though. Maybe things can change if I'm a little more positive about it. I think it's just a matter of getting the right message up to the right people in power to see things the way I see them, and hopefully to open the doors for people like me. Yes. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this presentation despite me getting it in very late. I wanted to just make sure I did this all right and really got everything I wanted to say into it. Take care, and I hope to hear from you again in the future. P.S. Here are the APA citations for the sources I discussed in the bigger picture. I assume you'd like to have these, for good reasons.